3,000. Big. 3-1 target, north boom stack, 36,000, 13,000. Bang. 40 scope, short skate, hot, right.
This is the Be One Change One podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's Cass, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
Hey, good morning, ones. Got a unique opportunity here. Cass is on holiday, so you're going to get the solo Roscoe show for a little while. Like it or hate it, this is what it is. You can click fast forward and wait till next week, or you can suffer through the next hour or so and listen to me yabber about whatever I'm going to talk about. But got something a little special this morning. So about 15 months ago, I published my first book. It's called No New Lessons. For the guys watching on YouTube, there it is. My first solo written compilation of a story. And I'd been part of another book earlier with a good friend of mine named Mike Capuzzi. And it's called I Love America. You can find it on Amazon, and I got to be chapter 1 in that one because he told me, he said, you're the only one that's turned in all their stuff on time. So, hey, there you go. There's you a good lesson is if you follow the deadlines and you get your stuff turned in on time, then lo and behold, good things happen. All right. Well, through that process, I had been reaching out to a few other guys who were either in the publishing or the writing business, and one of the guys asked me, he says, well, do you have anything that's ready to go now? Because I was working on Work Hard, Don't Suck. That's kind of where it all came from, is I was working on Work Hard, Don't Suck to get it published on a certain timeline, and was starting to ask some questions. I was in kind of the baby phases of writing and planning that one, and I was just out really just info gathering and doing some of that plan, posture, perform stuff. So I was kind of starting to plan and posture a little bit, and I was asking a lot of questions, and somebody put me in touch with Mike. Mike and I started talking a little bit, and then through a couple of other contacts, one of them asked me, he says, well, do you have anything that's ready to go right now? Well, I'd been working on No New Lessons since 2019. So I'd been working on it for a couple of years at this point, two and a half years, I guess. And it was one of those things where I'd write a little bit, tell a little bit of the story, and then I'd shelve it. And at one point I shelved it for about a year before I came back to it. And it's amazing when you do something like that. You know, Cass and I just put out an episode the other day, or I actually disregard. We've got one coming up that's on procrastination. And, you know, one of the things that we talked about in there was when you procrastinate, when you put things off and put them off and put them off, then oftentimes you're not getting the best product. On the other side of that coin is if you get at least an 80%, 90% solution done and then walk away from it for a little while and come back and revisit it, then chances are you're going to find a lot of errors. You're going to figure out a better way to tell it or say it or do the project, whatever it is you're doing. So that's what I'd done with No New Lessons. I wrote a lot and I shelved it. Came back, wrote a little bit more, shelved it. And this process has been going on for, I don't know, two and a half years or so. And so I told this person that asked me that, I said, hey, I got this thing, this No New Lessons thing, and it wasn't called No New Lessons then. It was just called The Bus Story. And so we started talking, we started brainstorming a little bit. And you know what? With just a little bit of work, I was able to bring No New Lessons to life. And, you know, we went through the whole phases, and I learned a ton. I didn't know anything about cover design or interior design or editing or, you know, buying the serial numbers that you have to have for a book and all these little details. The writing of the book is actually the easy part. It's everything else that's a pain in the butt. getting all that stuff lined up, I had a good friend kind of walk me through the process and help me learn some of those things. And once you learn them, it's kind of no big deal. Like Work Hard, Don't Suck was a lot more seamless because I already kind of knew the process. I knew how to do that kind of stuff. So we published No New Lessons around the 1st of December in, 22? So about 15 months ago or so. Well, by Christmas, maybe just a little after Christmas, we had been marketing it on Facebook. We had been putting it out there, and we made up some ads, and everything that we do, it's all grassroots. We're not paying anybody to do anything. I run a couple of paid ads, and it's with the pay by the click kind of ads, but everything else it's all homegrown. It's all grassroots, from the ground up. Me and Katie doing this stuff from the sweat of our own brow right here in the White House. So we had been marketing on some of the local Facebook pages, and one of the guys that saw it was a writer, column writer for one of the local newspapers. And he reached out to me, and we ended up doing a long interview, and he wrote a pretty good article. I was front page below the fold for the Wickenburg newspaper up here. And it's not a huge newspaper. Don't get, this is not like the New York Times or anything. I'm not trying to puff up or anything. I'm telling a story. Anyways, I got in the fucking paper. So a couple months go by, and a lady reaches out to me, emails me, and says, "Hi, I'm Pamela, and I run a mental wellness group up here for a retired community, and we do educational events, and we have guest speakers and all that. Would you come and be a guest speaker for us?" Well, initially I was like, well, what do you want? What's your end game here? What do you want me to talk about? And she goes, "Oh, well, I saw your ad in the paper about No New Lessons." I was like, "Oh, cool. I can come tell that story. That's easy." I love telling this story. I tell it all the time. I just told it to my grandson the other day. I gave him like the 15-minute version, and his jaw was on the floor the entire time. So anyways, it took Pamela and I about a year to work out the timing on this. And this is, we talk on the podcast a lot. We talk about just be patient, be persistent, and stay in touch. Don't burn bridges. And so Pamela and I, we stayed in touch and we worked it out. And I got to go up there a couple of months ago and give a talk to these people. And it was really cool. It was a pretty full room of people. And, I'm going into this and I'm thinking, these are all 55 and older people, and they want to hear life lessons. Like, what am I going to teach these guys about life that they don't already know? They're 55 and they live in a retirement community. They've clearly done something right with their life, and I think one of the big lessons that I took away is never stop learning, never stop trying to seek out information, never stop that thirst for knowledge and different experiences. And the people that I met up there, I shook every hand that was in the room, and I talked to almost all of them, at least in a short form conversation. And I walked away with good stuff. I talked to a guy who was one of the first A-10 pilots way back in the day. Like, talking like Vietnam type stuff. So get out there and explore, get out there and try things and all that. And I wanted to read one thing from the beginning here, and then I'll turn it over to the video. We were able to record that session, and the video's not awesome. It's just kind of still with me walking around. But the audio, you'll hear me telling the story and reading from the book a little bit. And so that's what today's episode is going to be about. But I wanted to read this. I wanted to read this up front. And I say it in the speech, but I think it's worth repeating here, because this is almost like a mantra for the way that I do business now. I'm coming up on half a century. I got a couple of years, and I'm at half a century, and I love this mindset that this guy has. This is Clay Hayes. He's the Alone Season 8 winner. If you haven't seen the show Alone, it's worth a listen or worth a watch. It's on Netflix, and he won Season 8. But sorry, spoiler alert. But anyways, during that season, I actually had to rewind this and write this all down so I got it right. But he says, just randomly, there is a place called adventure that lives just on the horizon. It calls us forth over the next ridge and around the next bend. It's where life's good stories live, the ones that will be told around campfires for a lifetime or more. But adventure doesn't give up her secrets easily. She keeps them hidden from all but the most willing to pay the asking price. And how fitting is that into the Be One, Change One construct, where we talk about doing the work and exploring and trying new things and always keeping your aperture open and your eyes on the horizon. I really love that quote. And I think it sums up a lot of the things, a lot of the ways that I try to live my life is I'm always looking at the horizon. What's next? I've got a couple projects now that I'm working on that are probably going to take me about a year. And when I roll them out, I'm going to hopefully be very proud of them because I'm doing the work. I mean, I've been up since 7 o'clock this morning, reading and researching and underlining in books and trying to gain as much background knowledge as I can so that I can do the project that I'm working on. So anyways, here it is. No new lessons. This talk, it's, 45, 50 minutes or so. And I'm telling the story to a room full of people. And there's some questions at the end. And listeners, so first of all, you can get your copy of No New Lessons. You can reach out to me directly and we'll work something out. Or you can go to Amazon and buy it on Amazon. Just go up to the search bar and type in No New Lessons and it should pop right up. It does for me anyways. I have an ebook and a paperback that's up there. First of all, we appreciate any support that you give us. But second of all, I really want your feedback on it because that's how we get better, right? Is taking constructive feedback and please, please try to do better than I got a 1-star on something the other day, a 1-star review that said it sucked. Well, that's great. Okay. I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate you engaging, but dude, you didn't tell me anything. You didn't offer me anything that was going to make it better for the next iteration. You know, who knows? If you would have given me some good pointed feedback, maybe I do a second edition of No New Lessons and I kick it out and it's even more awesomer. So anyways, you can get your copy out there. You can follow us on Facebook. We have the Be One Change One page where I throw some stuff up there and I try to not promote my books. I don't want to come across as pretentious or anything like that, but I am very proud of them and it took a lot of hard work and I probably should put it out there a little bit more, but I'm just not that kind of guy. So what I would ask is if you enjoy the story, if you have the book and you got a chance to read it, or if you just enjoyed the story and the tale, then please share. Please just kick it out to your networks, guys. It doesn't cost anything to hit that share button on some of the social medias and kick it out to the rest of them. And if you want, I'm going to put the hyperlinks and all that good stuff down in the show notes it'll be on Apple, it'll be on Spotify, it'll be on YouTube, just like always. But I'll make sure that all the links are up at the top so that if you wanted to copy the link and throw it out there to other people, I would really appreciate it. And that's how we grow, right? That's how we're going to grow this movement. And that's how the Be One Change One podcast is going to get bigger and bigger is by your help. So I ask you guys, please help. Share the show if you like it, if you're getting something out of it, if it's doing something for you, making you think, then kick it out to your networks and help us grow. So without further ado, I'm going to cut to the video and apologies for the video. It's a little grainy if you're watching on YouTube, but for the audio, it should be at least good enough. I know the questions at the end are a little bit faded, but you'll get the answers out of it. So I look forward to your feedback. Thanks very much. Thanks for being faithful followers of the Be One Change One podcast and have a good one. No New Lessons. Here we go. All right. Thanks for that intro, and I hope that I hope it wasn't an over deliver or over produce and under deliver type thing. But who said all that way from Whitman? Who made that comment? Have you driven through Wickenburg lately? I think what we need up here is a few more roundabouts. I don't know about you guys. We got full roundabouts, we got half roundabouts, we got roundabouts under construction. So we didn't even actually hit the city limit sign, and we had our first near-death experience. So, speaking of near-death experiences, No New Lessons, my book. That's what I'm here to talk about today, and hopefully over the next 3 or 4 hours, I'll captivate you guys, and I hope that you're hydrated and dehydrated. About an hour, maybe. That said, you get what you pay for. So here we go. Before we start, just to kind of just a couple of let's just take a big picture at life in general. All right, and this is going to go right into some of the things that we'll talk about, some of the lessons, planning or lack thereof, et cetera, et cetera. But I want us all to agree on one thing right up front, and that is we're all here right now because of decisions we made. And we can probably trace that all the way back to our childhoods and follow the bouncing ball all the way to us being in this room together. Those decisions are what shape us in our lives, and they're what put us down certain paths and help guide us a lot of times. And oftentimes we don't know if it's the right decision. You can't drive a parked car, so sometimes you just have to get in it and go for it, right? That's a lot of what we did on this. So looking through history, just looking back through history at some of the characters that we see, and I'm a huge, I love the Revolutionary War period of our American history. And I look at people like Ben Franklin and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all these great people. And then you go up through history and you see people like Abraham Lincoln, JFK, all the way through. And then there's people like the Rolling Stones and Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, right? Jimi Hendrix was a left-handed guitar player, strung a right-handed guitar up left-handed and played it with his teeth. There are a lot better musicians out there, a lot more talented musicians for sure. But what separated all those people from maybe some of the others and put them on a pedestal? And I say it was their attitude. A lot of it was their attitude. What drove them was their attitude, positive attitude or just downright cockiness sometimes. And it's that attitude that I kind of want to start with because I come from a fighter pilot community in the Air Force. I flew F-15s and F-16s, and I'm an F-35 instructor down at Luke now. And in our community, we have one of these characters, and his name was Robin Olds. He flew in Vietnam, and he retired as a general. And there were people out there that were better fighter pilots, for sure. There were people out there who had better hands and maybe flew the jet a little bit better, but Olds brought the swagger. When you see fighter pilots walk around and you kind of look at them and they walk maybe a little bit different, that was a Robin Olds thing. And he has this quote out there that I love. I'm just going to read it off here. Fighter pilot is an attitude. It's aggressiveness, it's confidence, it's competitiveness, but there's something else. There's a spark. There's a desire to be good, to do well in the eyes of your peers and in your own mind. So thinking about that and everything that I said about decisions and attitude and all that, we'll start to get into kind of the story. And you guys will see how the things that I've already talked about in the first 60 seconds to a couple of minutes of this is going to play right into how this whole ordeal unfolds. And it's a little bit of an epic tale. So this is a quote that's right up front of the book. If you haven't gotten your hands on the book, we'll talk afterwards. But this one's right up front. And it kind of frames those of us who like to go out on adventures, those of us who like to go outdoors and see new things or get the view at the top, so to speak. This is kind of the why behind that. And this was from Clay Hayes. If you haven't seen the show Alone on Netflix yet, it's a pretty good one. It's a survivor show, quite a few seasons out there, but he was the season 8 winner. And during that season, he says, there's a place called adventure that lives just on the horizon. It calls us forth over the next ridge and around the next bend. It's where life's good stories live, the ones that will be told around campfires for a lifetime or more. But adventure doesn't give up her secrets easily. She keeps them hidden from all but the most willing to pay the asking price. And anybody who's been on a hike of any kind of significance, whether it's climbing Vulture Peak or going out to the hot shots or anything that challenges you just a little bit, you know what he's talking about in there is you kind of have to do the work to get the view at the top, right? So this hike takes place in Alaska. And I want to take us there real quick. I'm going to read a short chapter in here. And it'll take me just a few minutes, but it's really going to hopefully paint the picture of the peril that we find ourselves in at kind of the midpoint of this trip. So here we go. Bear with me here for just a couple minutes. Going through Navy aviation pre-flight indoctrination at Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida, was a special experience. And I specifically remember the swimming portion. The curriculum contained an evolution during which the instructors placed the students in a large Olympic-sized pool with various obstacles scattered throughout. One such obstacle was called the chair. The chair sat just above the water, so when you sat down, your butt would barely be touching the surface. Below the chair were 2 plexiglass tubes of some length, maybe 10 to 20 feet, large enough for a human to swim through. Inside each tube was a hatch-like door, but only one was open at a time. The student was told which end was correct moments prior to execution of the event. A trainee would sit in the chair, strap in with a lap belt, and give a thumbs up to the instructor, who then pulled a lever and the chair rotated 180 degrees on its longitudinal axis. The legs of the chair now pointed towards the sky, and the trainee's cranium and upper body were completely submerged. He then had to unbuckle and swim to the end that had the open door at the end of the plastic tunnel. Disorienting is not even close to the word to describe the sensation when you go under. Everything you knew is wrong. Left is right, up is down. I might have even pissed my pants and forgot my name. That's true. Turning the corner out of the woods on that remote Alaskan beach was like turning on the lights in the living room on Christmas morning. The familiar rush of excitement reminded me of my childhood, staring wide-eyed at the expertly decorated tree with my presents stacked underneath. The same presents I'd been staring at for days, wondering what surprises each contained. I guess my emotions were due to the Christmas morning-like buildup of anticipation or the physical toil for the last several hours. Maybe it was just the spectacle of it all, contrasting sharply with the claustrophobia of the trail. Whatever it was, we were excited for maybe the first time on this trip. We smiled. If the beach had been made of something other than softball to bowling ball sized smooth river rocks, we might have skipped up the shoreline like Dorothy skipping down the yellow brick road, holding hands and singing. As quickly as our adrenaline and endorphins raged skywards, mine plummeted to basement levels. Standing slack-jawed on the bank of the river, I realized the true challenge presented. For starters, I walked up to the raging torrent, stared in shocking disbelief, and discovered for the first time that it flowed north. I don't know why I hadn't noticed this before. I might have been delirious and sleep deprived, and my brain could not get around or comprehend this newfound information. I'd read tons of internet articles, Krakauer's book Into the Wild twice, seen the movie of the same title, stared endlessly at countless topographical maps, researched and looked at pictures of other people's accounts of the trip, yet somehow I overlooked this glaring detail: north, not south. Up is down, left is right, white is black, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. Everything I had referenced and every landmark I'd counted on was now in the opposite direction. In military tactical aviation, we have a code word for this helpless state of mind: tumbleweed. It means you have completely lost all situational awareness and don't know which end is up. The feeling of complete and total disorientation I had standing on the shore with my feet in the tech, staring blankly in vain attempt to regain my wits, was exactly the same as that damn chair in Pensacola. Roscoe's tumbleweed. God, I'm stupid. The three of us stood at the edge of the rushing river for quite some time, each contemplating exactly how the heck we intended to conquer this obstacle. Anyone who has heard or read about Chris McCandless, the Stampede Trail, or the Magic Bus knows that this river is by far the largest obstacle impeding success on what would otherwise be a rather benign backcountry adventure. While stationary and surveying in all directions for a possible solution, I was taken back by just how forceful the tech really is. I had read about it and watched videos, but just like many other sites along this journey, you cannot possibly comprehend its totality until you're standing there staring it down. When we crossed the Savage just a short time prior, the water was relatively clear, and the flow was not terribly strong. The Tech was a completely different animal. The Teklanika River is a powerful river flowing north, as I know now, from the Alaska Range. It's fed from a glacier of the same name, and the water is freezing cold. During the winter months, the water runs lower and is more of a clear glacier blue, but this time of year, it's muddy and mucky and filled with silt and dirt from far upstream, as it stretches its boundaries like a fat kid wearing last year's clothes. Krakauer describes the river as latte-colored, or the color of wet concrete, in his book. It is indeed light grayish-brown with frothy eddies, swirls, and rapids. We couldn't see the bottom, even in the shallowest portions. The color made the river seem to take on a life of its own, especially in relation to its little brother, the Savage. The river also had a voice. As we approached the river, and while still in the woods, we registered the sounds of a low roar, almost like white noise generated by a box fan in a bedroom when you're trying to fall asleep. Getting closer and still in the woods, the sound grew stronger, lower and more powerful, more akin to driving a car with the windows down. Standing on the banks of the raging river was deafening, water splashing into the walls and banks and rapids rolling and boiling at the full length across, and the rumbling of rocks being tossed across the bottom. Even standing just a few feet from each other, we had to raise our voices to just under a shout to communicate. Farther upstream, the water braided out into several roots of varying sizes, with edges swellowing and billowing against the restraints of the banks. Bushes and small trees that otherwise would have been basking in sunshine were now at least partially submerged and taking a beating from the current. The river looked and sounded angry. After a few awestruck minutes, we managed to pick our jaws up off the beach and retreat to a clearing further away from the shouting river and closer to the tree line. The nearby sitting area was fairly well worn, making it obvious we were not the first to sit a spell and regain our composure after first contact with our opponent. Sitting on a log in the sunshine was not going to get us across this river, so we decided to work our way upstream, hoping to find a more suitable crossing point. The most discouraging thing about our exact position was that on the far side of the bank, the trail was taunting us like Arnold Schwarzenegger taunting the Predator in the movie The Predator. Come on, they're right here. What are you waiting for? Rested, we moved 100 yards or so upstream to take a closer look at one of the braided out sections. I plopped down in the water and eased out to the current up to my knees, thinking it wasn't too bad for the moment, and this could actually be possible. I stumbled cautiously further and further into the murky flow, but I lost my footing near the main current and I backed out. Determining the flow was way too swift to cross, we retreated once more. Bonsai and I thought it best to continue upstream in search of more favorable crossing area. Smokus, wanting nothing to do with walking further or getting wet again, tried to convince us all to return to the sitting area on the beach and make a fire to help us dry out and warm up a bit. Recognizing that separating the herd was generally a bad idea, Smokus caved into peer pressure, and we all chose to try a little further upstream for a good crossing area. As we continued up the east bank of the river in the dense brush and alders, the thickets eventually gave way to a wooded high ground overlooking the river. On this small knoll perched above the river, we spotted a blue tent. So we gave a wide berth before continuing upstream to a landing area on the side of the water. We could tell the area had been highly trafficked recently due to the matted foliage on the bank, but as far as we could tell, there was no way to cross here. The braid was only about 10 yards across this specific point. There was a small alder in the middle of the current that was breaking it up, swaying and straining against the current. We surmised someone must have launched a boat or sat there fishing or something because no one in their right mind would get in that water. So there we are. We're on the edge of this river in the middle of Alaska. And as I read that, I purposely didn't tell you a lot of details before I read the chapter. So there's a little bit of the 5 W's I need to answer for you. Why are we there to begin with? Who's this Chris McCandless guy? What's this bus you're talking about? Who the heck are you? Who's Bonsai and Smokus, and who names their kid Smokus? All right? Yeah. All right. So in 1992, this young man named Chris McCandless, he was I think he was from Virginia, and a little bit of an affluent upbringing. So he gives away his life savings and decides to go out tramping across the United States to go find himself. And he ends up in Alaska, walks out into the wilderness down this road, and he finds this bus. 4 months later, some moose hunters found him dead. He weighed 82 pounds. So that's a little bit of the why the bus is a little bit famous. Well, just because he died in the bus didn't necessarily make it famous. This gentleman named John Krakauer, who used to write for Outdoor Magazine, wrote an article called Death of an Innocent for Outdoor Magazine, chronicling Chris McCandless' story. It was a short article, but 10,000 words or so. That caught like wildfire, so he turns that into a book called Into the Wild. Fast forward a few years to 2007, Sean Penn picks it up and makes a movie out of it starring Emil Hirsch. And that's where this story really begins, because I want to just take a minute and blame this entire thing on my wife. True story. We're sitting in the house. We lived in Idaho at the time, and she comes in there and she goes, "Hey, I got this great movie that we can watch. It's called Into the Wild. Come check it out." And I gave her a little pushback on it. Wasn't terribly interested in watching a spoiled little rich kid go kill himself in Alaska. But she kept pressing. I relented, and I watched the movie. As I'm watching it, though, we lived in Alaska for a little over 4 years. And as I'm watching the movie, some of the scenes started bringing back a lot of memories of hikes that I'd been on and adventures that I'd done up in the mountains up there. And I mean, I'd traipsed all over that state. It's wonderful. If you've never been to Alaska, you need to go. You really need to go. Our 49th state is a true gem. It's pretty epic. So I watched the movie in 2007 or 8-ish. And I had this feeling, I couldn't get loose of this feeling that, man, I'd really like to go do this. I'm kind of a push it up kind of guy. Like I want to push my limits. I want to go to the top of the mountain kind of guy. The problem was I didn't see myself going to Alaska anytime soon. I'm stuck in Idaho. I'm in the military. It's just kind of not in the cards right now. She had forbade us forever living there. She crushed that dream a long time ago. Not going to live in Alaska anymore. To be fair, the whole time we were up there, she was either raising kids or pregnant with kids. So I had a bit of a different experience than she did. So, you know, in our lives, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about decisions and whatnot. In our lives, every now and then, the stars just align just right and present you some opportunities. Well, one of those opportunities came up in 2009 for me. We had been deployed to Afghanistan. My squadron had been deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months doing a close air support mission supporting the Army.
The problem is when we're doing that same mission for 6 months straight, the other missions that we're responsible for atrophy just a little bit. So when we got home from Afghanistan, we went through a several months long training cycle to try to get back up to a level, to get our squadron back to combat mission ready. Part of that training cycle was we were going to Alaska in June of 2009 for a training operation. You can see where this is starting to line up, right? So there was a guy in the squadron, and we were going to be up there for like 3 weeks. There was a guy in the squadron who was responsible for the morale and welfare of the trip. And one of the things that he put together was a salmon fishing trip. We were all going to get together on a Friday or Saturday night, go out salmon fishing all day, catch some fish, and then camp out on the bank of the river, make a fire, drink some whiskey, sing some songs, have a good time doing man stuff, right? When it started out, it was only $100 or so, which is not too bad to stomach. After a couple of weeks of what he called planning, it gets up to about $400. And that's when me and two other guys, we kind of bowed out gracefully. I'd lived in Alaska before. I've caught every species of salmon in the state. I don't need to do this again. We're going to find our own adventure. Thank you very much. Those two guys were Bonsai and Smokus. That was their call signs. My call sign is Roscoe. And we were the three people that were on this trip out there. So that's how we separated ourselves from the herd, and now we're trying to find something different. That something different was going to be going down to Denali National Park and just camping out, backwoods camping in Denali. I've never been to the national park, so I thought I'd go check out. This is going to bring me to really my second point, if you will, and that is planning is important. And I say that because of my lack of planning that I detail in the book. And it's going to pop out in several places in the book if you get a chance to read it. So apparently, and I didn't know this at the time, and this may have changed, but apparently you can't just walk up to the mountain in Denali and go camping. You have to get a pass. You have to ride the bus on the one road that goes in there, and you have to camp in designated camp areas. And here was the kicker: no campfires, only in the fire rings. So we couldn't go do our backcountry camping, and we were going to do what we called survival school style camping. We all went to survival school outside of Spokane, Washington, and they truck us up into the mountains just south of Canada up there and plop us out, and we have to survive for 3 or 4 days out there with just what's in our backpack. And I got the added pleasure of going in January. The first night I was there, yeah, you guys laugh. Yeah. So the first night I was there, I slept under a lean-to, and it was minus 17 degrees. And me and the guy that I was with, we snuggled, and I'm not ashamed of it. That's true. That's a true story. There's a lot more in that story, but I'll just leave it there. So what that did for us, though, that survival school, that takes a guy, Bonsai, for example. Bonsai's this tall. He's built like a gymnast. He's stout. He's strong. The problem is he grew up in inner city Pittsburgh. He's not an outdoorsy guy at all. And survival school gives those guys a little bit of confidence that they can survive behind enemy lines, at least just for a couple of days. They've at least heard of the word fire before. All right. So now my bubble is completely burst. We are in Alaska at this point. Due to my lack of planning, I could have probably found this out weeks ago, but I waited until we got up there. And now we've got just a few days before the weekend is coming where we're going to do this adventure, where they're going on the salmon trip and we're going to go find something else. That's when I remembered that bus. I don't know, there's a bus up here somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is, but it's up here somewhere. And Google helped me find it. And I pinpointed it, started doing some research, and I said, we can totally do this. And I remember going up to Smokus in the hallway at work the next day. And this might have been Monday before we were supposed to depart on Friday. I go up to Smokus and I said, hey man, how extreme do you want to get on this adventure that we're going on? And he stands there and he goes, I'd say moderately extreme to extreme. I said, dude, we're going to the bus. And I don't know, I guess I was expecting some questions or some pushback or some what bus? But he just says, okay. And he walked away. And so now I'm left here holding the bag going, well, I guess I gotta actually plan this up a little bit. So, another little bit of a lesson that pops out of here, not really a main lesson, but maybe a side, just a side discussion is, you guys have probably heard of Roosevelt talk about the man in the arena, right? And it's not the critic that counts, and haters gonna hate. Don't worry about the noise and the naysayers. Well, that was our squadron. How many people can keep a secret? Ben Franklin says 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. All right. True story. All right. So the cat's out of the bag. Our entire squadron knows at this point. And again, I'm just kind of, I'm not really paying attention to that too much. I don't really worry about the noise. But the one person that gets a vote is my squadron commander. He is the person who's really responsible for our safety and security as we're up there. And he gets to tell us what we can and can't do on the weekends, you know, within a certain mileage or, in this case, danger level. So I'm having this conversation with him in the hallway, and it wasn't really an argument. I'm not going to argue with my squadron commander, but I'm pushing back a little bit because I really want to go on this trip, and he's just adamant that he's not going to let us do this. And I finally kept scratching at him, and he finally unloads and he says, "I don't know anything about this except that dude died." And that was kind of my opening to go, okay, look, he's a spoiled little rich kid from Virginia that didn't know what he was doing. We're seasoned outdoorsmen who've been to survival school. Like, we can do this, right? False confidence. I heard you giggle. Yeah. So he says, all right, Roscoe, I tell you what, if you can plan this up and you can assure me that you're not going to bite off more than you can chew, I'll let you go. Yes. So I start planning. At this point, I start planning. Remember a long time ago when I told you planning was important? Now I'm getting to the planning phase, like 3 days prior to us departing. So I go to my life support section. They're the people who are responsible for packing our ejection seats and making sure our survival kits have everything in it that we need, our little baggies of water and all that stuff. And I talked to one of the sergeants there, and he gave me 100 yards of 500-pound test parachute cord. Then he gave me 100 yards of 1,000-pound test parachute cord. And when you read the book, you'll find out why that's critically important. The 1,000-pound parachute cord is about as big as my finger. He also gave me a handheld UHF VHF radio with all the search and rescue frequencies already pre-programmed, just in case. And I got a GPS with all the maps of the area loaded in so I could pinpoint the coordinates of where the bus was, and I could keep track of how far we had to go. It's pretty decent planning, right? Everybody's like, yeah. You need to buy the book. If that's not a selling point. So I go back to the squadron commander, show him all my cool guy gadgets that I got, and he says, fine, y'all go have fun, be safe. Great. Well, the way that it had worked out, we had that weekend to do this adventure, but we had to be back on Sunday by 4:00 on Sunday afternoon because we had to do mission planning for Monday's flights. We couldn't leave the base until about midnight Friday night because Bonsai was flying the late shift, and he wasn't even going to get done with his debrief until 10:30 or 11 or so. So I kind of did the math a little bit, and I'm looking at this whole problem. It's about a 3.5 hour drive down to the trailhead, 3.5 back, give or take. I was told there'd be no math, but we got about 40 hours total, and that leaves us with about 33-ish, 31 to 33 hours of actual boots on the ground hiking time to make this. So we got to keep a pretty good clip. We leave out Friday night at midnight. And if you haven't been to Alaska, you might have heard this about the 24 hours of daylight and total darkness in the winter. It's almost true. In that particular part of the state at that time of year, this was summer solstice weekend in 2009, June 21st. So it's the longest day of the year to begin with. And the sun doesn't really set. It just kind of dips below the horizon just a little bit. So we could have drove the whole way without headlights. It was that much daylight, but it's not like the sun's up blaring in your face or whatnot. The cool part about that was, as we're driving south, you kind of wind out of Fairbanks and you're on Highway 1 headed towards Anchorage, and the road splits the Alaska range right through between the towns of Healy and Cantwell and keeps going south down to Anchorage. Right before you get to Healy, about 2 miles north of that was going to be our turnoff. Well, we got about 40 miles. It ended up being about an hour where we have the entire Alaska range is our windshield. And I'm telling you, it was epic. And I stole this idea or this quote from another guy listening to a podcast, and he says, this is where postcards come from. This is like walking around inside of a painting. The mountains were so spectacular. Off to this side, off to the southwest, you got Mount McKinley over here that's just solid white with glaciers and snow. And then as the range kind of goes down a little bit, it becomes more jagged and sawtooth. And the foreground just kind of rolls out like a green carpet in front of you. And it looks so soft out in the distance. And then as you hit the tree line on the mountains become this color. They get really dark and jagged. And at the top, they're capped in just a little bit of snow still. Even at that time of year, it's still freezing cold up there. And we were joking, I remember joking as we were driving down there, that they kind of looked like chocolate brownies with whipped cream on top. It was so beautiful. It was so epic. And that was our view for about an hour. So we turn off on this road called Stampede Road, and we're headed towards the bus. What is this bus? So the bus was out there back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. There was mines all the way out this road called Stampede Road, and the mining company put a series of buses out there scattered out by X amount of miles for stopovers for the miners as they were going back and forth to the mines. When the mines shut down, they drug all the buses back out, except for this one that was stuck down this road. It had a broken axle, so they just leave it. And moose hunters and locals in the area, there are some cabins out there, locals in the area, they would use that as stopovers or places to launch their hunting expeditions or different things. And we were maybe 30 miles north of Denali National Park. So every now and then you got travelers that would hike up rivers and end up there. And that's where Chris McCandless, he anchored down for a few months. So here we go. We turn down Stampede Road and we're headed out towards the bus. We drive down about 8 miles and we park at a lake. What was the name of the lake? 8 Mile Lake. Real genius, right? Real creative. So we park there and we get out and we start hiking. You guys are avid outdoors people. They say to start chilly on a hike because your body heat will warm up and you want to dress in layers, right? And you want to start chilly because in a few minutes it usually takes me about 10 minutes. After about 10 minutes, I got some sweat going. I'm good, right? It's 40 degrees and we're in shorts and t-shirts. How we doing? Oh, by the way, Alaska, that time of year it's very beautiful. It's also very wet. Everything has melted and you get daily thunderstorms. The humidity is way up. So that just makes it even colder, right? It was kind of miserable, to be honest. You can see our breath. You can see the steam coming up off the lake behind us. And so we start walking. Planning is important. We're walking down the road, Stampede Road. It's really kind of a 4x4 trail at this point. Potholes start getting bigger and bigger, and now they're stretching across the road. And what's one of the cardinal sins of going out on a backcountry hike? Don't get your feet wet. If your feet get wet, you need to stop, dry your boots out, put on some new socks, keep your feet dry, right? This is jungle rot in Vietnam was a big thing, right? Well, here we are. We're faced with some decisions now. Go back to my opening statement about we're all here because of the decisions that we made. Planning is important. We can either go around these mud holes. Every time we did, though, we're stepping off into peat moss and our feet would sink, getting them wet and damp. It was harder to walk through that crap than it was the trail. Or we can turn around and go back to the truck. You remember that Robin Olds quote that I read you to begin with about attitude? There's no way we're going back to that truck. No, we're goal-oriented people. We're determined people. We're committed to this. So we made a decision to go for it, and we got our feet wet for the first time. And it was a thing. It was not pleasant. That water was ice cold. But it gets better. Wait for it. There's more. So the trail, as we kept going, miles click off, and there's a creek that flows out of the high ground that had taken over the trail. Was that? The creek is the trail is the creek. Entropy, it turns out that entropy is a thing, and nature's going to take the path of least resistance, and that was the road. So now we're looking at it going, okay, we can try to go around this and go through the woods. We can go through the creek, or we can go back to the truck. Well, option C is not even discussed. To go off the trail may take us miles out of the way. We might get lost in the woods. We have no idea. So we go through the creek. If you guys, anybody cold plungers in here? Anybody do cold plunges? All right. Well, the idea behind a cold plunge, how you see people sit in those things for several minutes at a time, is when you submerge in still water like that, your body heat heats up a thermal barrier around your skin. And that's how you can, if you go and just stick your feet in your pool right now, it's cold at first, but after just a few seconds, it's not so bad. And it's not that your feet are getting numb, it's your body heat is heating up that thermal barrier, and that's what keeps you safe. The problem is when the creek is flowing, there's no thermal barrier. So after just a few minutes, our legs from about here down are as red as that guy's shirt. It's pretty bad. So, how we doing? Feet are soaked, going down this thing. We're freezing cold. We're a little bit miserable. But wait, there's more. Bill Bryson wrote a book called A Walk in the Woods, and it's about his experience hiking the Appalachian Trail on the East Coast. And he describes walking through the woods as walking through a green tunnel. And I can attest to that. This, so far on our trip, it was like walking through a green tunnel. You can't really see too far out to the left and the right. You can only see what's really in front of you. In our case, it was a little bit of a tunnel of alder and birch trees and the creek. And that was really our focus. Well, we pop out of the woods and we're in the sunshine. And finally, we're happy for maybe the first time in the last couple of hours, because now we can warm up and maybe thaw out a little bit. You see Mount McKinley down to the southwest and the open tundra. You can see a tree line maybe a mile, and that's kind of where we're going. Up here is a little bit more high ground. Then we happen to look down and there's mud, lots and lots of mud. And I know this now because I did planning after the fact, but these mud flats they're sort of landmarks on this road, and people know about it, and it's well discussed. It's well documented that these mud flats it's a pretty significant obstacle. We're talking car swallowing mud in places. It's deep, it's watery, it's all muskeg and peat moss and just really gnarly stuff. And so here we are, we get another decision point. We go around it. We have no idea how big this mud flat is. Go back to the truck, or we can go through it. What do you guys think we did? Here we go. So now we're post-holing through mud like this deep. And it's just, I mean, it's black, nasty mud. And I think Bonsai and I were out front, and we learned this after the fact with the pictures, but Smokus had fell down in the mud. And I don't think we knew this at the time. I think we were lockstep trying to get ahead. And, after the fact, we kind of joked. We were like, you know what? Alaska's got him now. Maybe he'll come back as a flower or something. So we get through that. And now instead of freezing cold legs, now we have freezing cold legs that are covered in mud. And we're like, all right, Alaska, what else you got? Come on. All right. So we keep going. We're down the trail a little bit. And the next curveball was the beaver ponds. The creek that comes down, it's called Fish Creek is the name of it. And the beavers had dammed these ponds up, or dammed the creek up to create these ponds. And we're standing on the bank of these things, just kind of shaking our head in disbelief, going, now what? Well, the same three options really apply to us. Only this one we almost had a fourth option. We could have crossed the beaver pond or the beaver dam itself. You guys familiar with beavers and their dams? Have you seen them at least? Okay. Well, when I was a kid, I grew up around a lot of beavers when I was a kid in our area, and it wasn't a big deal to cross their dams because I knew how long they had been there. I was pretty familiar with the brush that was around that was used to build them and their strength and their integrity. But when you're out in the wilderness and you come across a beaver dam, it's generally accepted knowledge to not cross a beaver dam. It's built by a little bitty animal like this, and you haven't met this guy. You don't know what kind of worker he is. And every utensil that he uses to build this dam is shaped like a Spartan spear. So generally a good idea not to be crossing beaver dams. So we can go around it, we can go through it, or we can go back to the truck. What do you think we did? All right. This is one of my favorite parts of the book, is describing this sensation. Guys, have you ever gotten into a moderately cool pool, and when that water gets to about here, it's kind of a thing, isn't it? Okay, now multiply that by a magnitude of freezing beaver pond in Alaska, and let me know how we're doing. All right, we sang soprano for a little while. So we pop out of the beaver ponds on the other side, and we're going through what I think was probably the most dense forest of the entire trip. Black spruce, white birch, very thick forest, very shade, no sunshine, very cold because we're frozen from here down. All of our important stuff is now in our backpack. And this lasted for, I don't know, a mile or so. And then we come across the first of two rivers was the Savage River. All right. My next point, or my next lesson, I guess, that I would take out of the book would be, if you're going to set audacious goals, if you're going to try to reach something grand or great, however you define that, you're going to have to do hard stuff to get there. Whether it's saving for retirement or going on a big trip or hiking to a stupid bus in Alaska, you've got to do hard things. And so far, we've we faced some hard things. And I know that probably everybody has their own stories, and you can relate to this about a goal that maybe you set. Maybe it was getting through college. That's a grind, and you got to do hard stuff to get through there. Or some of the hikes that Pamela takes you on, some of those are a grind. And I know the one that I went on with her, I don't want to do again because it was cold and windy and my wife was miserable. So we're standing there at the Savage River, and it's maybe seriously from here to the door wide. It's not real big at all. And I kind of remarked, I was taking a video at the time, and I kind of remarked about how I've fished barefooted in creeks that are worse than this. I was really unimpressed. I made a comment about maybe coming and making camp on the beach because it was really pretty. It was beautiful there. But getting across it was not a big deal. So now I've got a little bit more confidence going up to this next river. And we pop out of the woods, and that was the chapter that I read you, is facing that Teclanica River. The Savage River does not even come close. This thing was hundreds of yards. It was one of the fastest rushing waters I think I'd ever seen. The water's the color of chocolate milk. You can't see through it. You can hear the rocks along the bottom rolling. It's going that fast. And down to when we pop out of the woods, Mount McKinley's down to our left and south, and up here, upstream or downstream, it closes into a canyon, real tight canyon walls, and the water just gets even faster and faster. So now we go back to where we left when we were standing there on that little bank in that little matted out piece that I read you about, where we said, there's no way anybody can get in this water, right? We decided to go back to that sitting area that I described. There was a log with a little fire ring. We decided we were going to go back there, gain our composure, gather ourselves a little bit, start a fire, dry out some. And on the way back, on the way down to that, it was, I don't know, maybe 200 or 300 yards through the woods. On the way there, Bonsai decides, hey guys, I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to try to cross one more time. This doesn't look that bad. Now, in hindsight, it looked just like everywhere else. But at the time, we were like, okay, fine, try it. Go for it. So he gets out into this, it's maybe as wide as these chairs. It's really not that wide, 5-7 yards at the most. And the main channel is probably only maybe 3 feet. The hardest part of the current's maybe 3 or 4 feet. And so he's facing upstream. He's got a stick and he's leaning into it and he's kind of doing this, try to get across it. And when he got out to that main channel and took that step, remember I said Bonsai's, he's kind of short, got a low center of gravity. He's very strong. He's very muscular. He's built like a gymnast. His legs went out from underneath him and he disappeared. Yeah, he was gone. I've only seen the look of sheer terror on somebody's face twice in my life. I've gone to combat a handful of times in the air, on the ground. I've come up on some gnarly car wrecks. I've been first responder to a lot of wicked, wild things. But I've only seen that look twice. We were camping, Katie and I and our kids, our 3 boys. We were camping in Idaho, and it was 4th of July weekend. We decided at the end of the weekend we were going to hike up to the top of this mountain called Trinity Mountain. There's a little fire lookout at the top. And me and my youngest son had done this a few times up there. So we drive the truck up as far as we can. And even on 4th of July weekend, there's still snow all over the place in the shade and all the cool sides of the mountain. And so we get up there and we're hiking up, kind of up the switchbacks. It's a 4x4 trail, so it's not like narrow or anything. Me and my youngest son, we had hiking shoes on with decent grip. So we're a little ways ahead. And all of a sudden I heard a scream and I looked back and my middle son was gone. Yeah. So I run back down there and he had slipped on the snow. And this mountain is maybe about this steep. It's really steep and jagged. The Sawtooth Mountains, they're just north and east of Boise. And it's about 1,000-foot drop down to the bottom where there's a bowl and a little bit of a lake. When he slipped on the snow, he had flipped his body around and dug in his fingernails like this and stopped himself just a few feet down the hill. And when I walked up on him, there was that look. He was, I'm not exaggerating, he was scared to death. He was frozen in fear. So I got a stick and I eased down there and I got him to grab it and I pulled him back up. Katie pulls the mama bear card. We start to retreat. She goes, this is dumb. We're not going anymore. So we're headed back to the truck, and I'll be darned if about 50 feet later, she didn't do the same thing. She slipped on the snow. Oh yeah, get her to tell you the story. It's even funnier from her point of view. Instead of flipping around and digging into the hill like this, She scoots on her butt and she eyeballs a pine tree just a few feet down, and she steers herself, and she took that pine tree right in the crotch. And that's what stopped her from going down that hill. So same thing, same stick, got her up, and we retreated, lived to fight another day. The second time that I ever saw sheer terror on somebody's face was Bonsai when he popped up out of that water. He disappeared into the chocolate milky water, and then he pops back up, and he looked at me, and that was that look of tell my wife and kids I love them. And it's amazing when you're in something like that. It's amazing how much can go through your mind in such a short period of time. We're talking microseconds that this took, and how much can go through your mind while that's happening. And I'm not kidding. It seemed like an eternity. Smokus and I are coming out of our backpacks. We're going in after him. Bonsai's on his way to Russia. This was turning out to be everything that my squadron commander had feared, right? Alas, he pops up, gets his feet back under him. We get him back out. And for a few seconds, it was a little terrifying. I think we all got a pretty good adrenaline shot at that point. But after a few minutes or after a few seconds, we just started laughing uncontrollably and taking a bunch of pictures and laughing about Bonsai's demise and all this. But I really think that in that moment, that was the moment that we knew, deep down, we knew we were done. We're not getting to this stupid bus. This river's kicked our butts. It's by far the biggest obstacle, and we lost. We lost. And that brings me to kind of my next lesson. And that is humility is a superpower. If you can get to a point in your life where you can say, I don't know, or I messed up, or I'm beaten, then that opens up a door to a whole nother world. And I do this with my coaching and in my different projects. I do this on my podcast with people that I talk to. I do this with different guests. I did this with my brother just a few days ago, where we were talking about, man, he texted me. I haven't talked to this kid in 5 years. And he texted me out of nowhere and he says, can you help me out? Yeah, I can help you, man. You don't realize it, but you just opened the door to a whole new path out in front of you. Well, that's kind of what we did there on the banks is we had to humbly tuck our tails and go, we're beaten, man. We gave this almost to death. We gave this everything we had. We almost lost Bonsai to the Bering Strait. So we decide we're going to go back and sit at the little sitting area, make us a fire and dry out. We head back down there, and I was the last to give up. I'm kind of hard-headed. So I hiked downstream a little bit, down towards where the canyon walls kind of came in a little bit, thinking maybe there's a chance. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it gets better down here. And it didn't. It got worse. So I walked back up to the sitting area where they had a little fire going at this point, and I just sat down and I said, well, boys, we're done. That's it. We didn't know this at the time or until this moment, but Bonsai reaches over into his backpack and he pulled out 3 cigars. And he had stolen them from one of the lieutenant colonels in the squadron from his personal stash. And they were going to be our victory cigars when we got up to this bus. He goes, guys, we're going to get up to this bus and we're going to smoke these cigars, man. And yeah, and I don't feel really bad about smoking these cigars because we gave this everything we had. I mean, just short of death, we left it all in the field, man. And so we're opening the packets of the cigars, and that's when we heard, hey guys, how you doing? Exactly. We haven't seen another human in hours. Well, I read in the book, about a little blue tent that we took a wide berth around. So there's 3 kids up there. They're 18 to 21, 20-ish years old. They're from Canada, 2 brothers and a friend, a lifelong friend. And they had saved their money all winter, and they were up in Alaska just hiking around and finding Jesus and stuff. They were just having a grand old time. And here they come up there, and they're in blue jeans and flannel. And he says, hey, we just saw your fire. We thought we'd come say hi and see what you guys were up to. And I think every one of us had this look on our face like, what? So we start talking, and it turns out they're super cool. From the moment we saw them, we called them the magic hippies. And they lived up to it. Trust me, they lived up to it. So a few minutes go by. We're having small talk with these people. And one of them, I don't remember which one, for the life of me, I can't remember their names, but one of them asked the question that would literally change our lives forever. And he says, so did you guys make it to the bus? No, man, it's, we tried the river and Bonsai in Russia and no. He says, well, we were just there yesterday. Humility is a superpower, right? Humility is a superpower. Hippies do tell, right? So he says, well, we can show you where we crossed. And so what had happened, they had no idea what this bus was. They didn't know what was going on. They heard about it from, I don't know, some other hikers or something. And they decided they were going to give it a shot. So they put on their board shorts and grab their flip-flops over their heads and they go across the river. They get to the other side and they go, crap, we still got 10 miles to get to the bus. So they go back across the river, gather up all their hiking stuff, and go back across the river again. Hike out to the bus, spend a little time, and then come home. Hippies, good Lord, you got to share this knowledge with me, right? So they take us down to that matted down place where we were like, there's no way somebody got in the water here. In the book, I talked about it. I went through it really fast, but there's a little alder right in the middle of that channel that broke the current up. And the hippie goes, hey, if you can get out there, that alder breaks the current up and you kind of gain your composure just a little bit. And then you step off into that main channel. And this is where he starts describing hydrodynamics as applied to the Alaskan river system. You see how the eddies swirl over here? If you step off in that main channel, it'll twirl you around and boom, you grab a hold of this tree and then you pull out the other side. All right. Guess who gets to be the guinea pig for this little evolution? This guy. So everything back in the backpack. Here I go. Cinch everything down and out to the middle of the thing. The alder's broken the currents. And I'll be darned. I'm standing there and it's barely hitting me at all. Look, these hippies might be onto something. Okay. Well, here's the moment of truth. And I stepped off into that current and that thing hit me like a ton of bricks. Boom! And sure enough, spun me around in a circle, grabbed the tree, pulled out the other side. I got the world's 5 greatest cheerleaders on the other side of the bank. Going, oh, you can do this. And I pulled up on the other side. And, that kind of brings me to my next point, and that's opportunities are everywhere. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what door is going to open. And I think that that's really a challenge for us. As we get a little bit older in life, and some of you are my elders for sure, and you have a lot of experiences, not being numb to those experiences and really being hyper aware to these opportunities that sometimes present themselves. You never know when you might meet somebody that can completely change your life. Somebody that you never knew even existed, like 3 hippies in the Alaskan wilderness, completely changed our vector forever. Had it not been for those 3 hippies, I would have never written a book because it would just been another failed hiking adventure. Not terribly epic at all. But in the case of no new lessons, it turned out to be pretty good. So I get the other 2 guys across, and now we cross the river. The other section of the river was much, much larger, but it was a lot slower. So it was fairly benign to get across it. Now we're on the west bank of our nemesis. We won. We beat it. We're on the west bank. And we turned around to the west, and we still got 10 miles. You guys are hikers. You guys are avid outdoors people. Put on your best shoes and go walk 10 miles. And let me know how you feel at the end of that. Even those of us who stay in fairly good shape, it's a thing. So it wasn't like we were jumping for joy or anything. We still had a lot of work to do ahead of us. And that's where I'm going to leave you. So you gotta read the story. You gotta read the story. Now, as I get ready to wrap up a little bit, and I'll be able, if you guys want to talk and tell stories and ask questions and stuff, I'm definitely available for that. But there's a chapter in the back of the book that after it went through editing and all that, I was talking with a friend of mine and he says, man, you really need to leave us with something that just kind of drills everything in. Just one short something that just really, the home run or the knockout punch. And so I wrote a chapter in here called Parting Shots. And these are just things that I sort of think about as I'm making decisions or I'm planning adventures or I'm living my daily life. These are things that I kind of keep in the forefront of my mind. And the first one is keep chopping wood. I've been telling my kids this since they were little. I just say, keep chopping wood, man. Sometimes life is a grind. College is a really great example of you just got to keep chopping. But if you chop wood long enough, you end up with a big old wood pile in the form of a diploma. If you start saving for retirement early and you keep chopping wood, you end up with a nice wood pile in the form of a 401k. or you end up in a bus in Alaska. Whatever your goal is, sometimes you just have to grind it out. The next one is don't suck. Oh, it sounds funny, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. And I don't anticipate anybody sucking. It's more of an outlook of trying to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. Maybe it was a personal reaction that I had. Maybe I walked out of the supermarket and my bag broke and I threw out a flurry of 4-letter F words and the little kid over there heard it. Maybe I can do that better tomorrow. Maybe I can be just a little bit better tomorrow and try to suck less than I did yesterday. The next one is compete hard. And I don't necessarily mean I want you guys out there yelling at each other about who has the better lawn or throwing golf clubs at each other who had the better game. It's more competing with yourself, and it kind of goes back to the don't suck piece of it. And that's just compete with yourself to be a little bit better and maybe make those personal interactions a little more pleasant next time. And, not everybody likes everybody, and that's okay. But sometimes you can put on a smile and make it at least a little bit pleasant. Compete with yourself. That's the one person that you'll always be in competition with. Make yourself a little bit better each day. The next one is move the ball. I coached football for a long, long time, and this is something I taught my kids was, let's just move the ball, guys. If we can move the ball an inch, guess what? That's an inch closer to the goal line. Every now and then you go out there on first down and you get sacked for 5 yards. We moved the ball, but it was in the wrong direction, right? Well, what do? You get back in the huddle and you try to not suck and you call your best 2nd down and 15 play and you keep trying to move that ball. This goes to goal setting, whether you're picking up your kids from school or trying to go on a hike in Alaska. It doesn't matter. Just keep moving forward. And I can tell you that sometimes you just have to go left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And if you read the book, you'll see some of that in here at some points. And the last thing is be a champion. And this is a mindset thing, right? Being a champion to me is a mindset. And as I've read a lot of books and done my own adventures, and I've got some trophies in my room that are this tall. But as I started to put the things together, I came up with, to be a champion, first of all, you need to have passion. You got to have desire. You got to want it. You got to have your why, right? You got to have something that's driving you to this thing. So you got to have that desire first. Then you have to have the discipline to be able to do the things that are going to get you there. And then you have to sustain that through commitment over time. If you can do those 3 things, find your why, have the self-discipline to do the things that you should and not do the things that you shouldn't, and then do those over time consistently enough, then you can be a champion. And that's where I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to read you one last quote. This is probably my favorite quote in the book. And if I could put this on my headstone, I might do it. This sums up the way that I think I want to live my life. This is Harry S. Thompson, and he says, "Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, loudly proclaiming, 'Wow, what a ride.'" There you go. So, yeah, I'll turn it over to you, or if you guys want to chat, I'm here until when do we have the room? Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Did you see the movie? Was it Wild with what was that chick's name in it? I can't remember. Reese Witherspoon. Yeah. And it was based on a real life of Cheryl Strayed. Okay. So when you go on any kind of big backcountry thing, that always becomes the discussion point is, what are we going to carry? And so let me rewind a little bit back to when we lived in Alaska the first time. When Katie and I lived in Alaska, I bought her a backpack at Fred Meyer's, and it was a little school backpack. It's fairly heavy duty, but it was just a regular old Fred Meyer's brand backpack. And that was the backpack that I took. And I might have had 20 pounds, maybe tops. I had a single Nalgene bottle and I had a Katadyn water filter. That was our sole source of hydration between the 3 of us. We had a couple of oatmeal packets. And there's a funny story in here when we were getting ready to depart the base on that Friday night. We're walking out of the chow hall. I'm literally walking out and I go, oh crap, I got nothing to boil water in. So I snuck back into the kitchen of the chow hall and found a young airman who he obviously didn't want to be there on a Friday night. And I begged him have you seen on the salad bars, those little square metal bowls that they put like cheese or ham or something in? He gave me one of those. And that was what I was able to boil oatmeal in as we were sitting there right before we met the hippies. So not much gear. I had a hoodie and I had a long sleeve Under Armour. I had some cargo shorts and some rain pants. That was all of my clothes. I had my hiking shoes and a couple of pairs of extra socks, and that was really about it. I've never hiked with a gun. I've never hiked with a gun. And in Alaska, no kidding, I've been on a river as wide as this room with a bear on the other side and me over here going for the same fish. But I've never carried a gun. So I had my Marine Corps K-bar knife. It's about that big. And that was really about it. So not much. Is there another question? Yeah. What's that? No, I'm a simulator instructor now down at Luke. Yeah. Even the greats have to hang them up at some point. Tom Brady had to hang them up. You know, we get old, we get broke, and I've already had the back surgery to prove it. Yes, ma'am. You need to buy the book. See, I bet you that there's an entire chapter devoted to just that problem. Yep. Yeah, it was a solution that when you get delirious after so long and you're malnourished and you're sleep deprived, sometimes your brain doesn't work the way that it ought to. And we probably could have found out a better way to crack that nut, but I'm standing here, so it worked. I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. We never asked them how they got back across the river. That was something that escaped us. I think we were so elated to get across in the first place that it just escaped us. What else? Anybody else? Pamela?
Well, I can tell you guys from the wife's point of view,
She had no idea that all this was going on. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm. Right. There were several people who knew where we were going and what we were doing. There were our squadron commander. I mean, I had to brief him in detail where we were driving to because we had to borrow a rental car that's on the government's dime. So it's not like we could just four-wheel down the Stampede Trail. That's why we had to park short at 8 Mile Lake. We can't destroy the rental car. So yeah, several people knew where we were going, and we had such a finite timeline that if we didn't show up on Sunday at 4 o'clock, the search parties were going out for us for sure.
Does that allow you to take a little more rest?
I don't really think we thought about that, to be honest with you. I don't think that entered the calculus at all. I think it was just us being overly confident and driven and determined and maybe full of bravado and ego. And well, yeah, but I mean, even up to that point, with the obstacles that we had hit, there was no point where we even discussed turning back around. And we get up to the river, and like I said, I mean, it took one of us almost dying for us to even consider defeat. And only at that point did we reach for those cigars. The hippies get us across the river, and now we're all of a sudden we're reinvigorated, right? And shoot, this is gonna happen, So we never smoked the stupid cigars. Never did. Never smoked the cigars. Yeah, I think after that point, I think we just forgot about them. So we got across the first time that morning at probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had started hiking at 3:30 in the morning. So it took us now. Here's something I didn't tell you. Okay, so I left this detail out, and it was on accident. But in my planning, I had planned this trip was going to be 14 miles to the bus, 14 miles back, 28 miles round trip. Not too bad when you got 33-ish hours to hike it, right? Turns out it was 15 miles to the river, 10 miles to the bus. So now instead of a Math in Public 28-mile round trip, we're looking at more like a 50-ish mile round trip. And that doesn't count the footsteps that we did up and down the bank trying to find a crossing. Yeah, so we ate up a lot of time that we didn't really even know that we were eating up. Like we thought we were on a good pace, thinking that we're going to arrive at this bus any minute, turns out we still had a long, long ways to go. So it was about 1 o'clock-ish, 1, maybe 2 in the afternoon when we got to the west bank of the river on Saturday. Yeah. It was, see, I can't tell you. Can't tell you. Or read the book. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's good. Yeah. Yeah. I think the book is better. Krakauer does a really good job of painting the picture, and Sean Penn takes some dramatic license in it, I believe. But yeah, very, very good tale for sure.
It actually came out with when my oldest son was 16. Of course, after watching that movie, what does he want to do?
Well, you told me once upon a time that you tried it. Yeah. You told me once upon a time that you tried to get to the bus.
Yes.
How did that end? We can take cash. We've got one of the little swipey doodads, or you can get it on Amazon. Yep. $15. And I'll put my name in it. Not that it's worth anything, but yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be One Change One on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.